Hey friends, hey besties, welcome or welcome back to my channel, welcome back to my bedroom floor, and we are going to talk once again about all the books that I read in the last month. I haven't done a sit down wrap up video in what feels like forever. I've been really loving doing reading vlogs recently, but I just thought we'd mix it up a little bit. I don't want my channel to get boring or too oversaturated in one kind of content or the other. So today I thought we would take it back and do a more formal wrap up just from my bedroom floor, because it's just easier, honestly, than trying to set myself up in a different room and find a quiet time to film and everything else. This is just easier. This is just the vibe right now that we're going for. So I read 12 books in May. I actually feel like I could have read more. Only one book put me into the biggest slump. It was awful. It was possibly the worst book I have read, certainly this year, and definitely for quite some time, but we will get on to that. I actually can't remember what I rated all of these. I think I know, but there might be a few where it was like an in-betweeny rating. So if you have me on Goodreads and I say that I've rated something differently in this video than I have on Goodreads, just believe the Goodreads, okay? Because that is where my in the moment official rating tends to go. And if you don't follow me already on Goodreads, I will make sure it's linked so that you can. Not that my reviews on there are substantial, I just tend to just put a star rating in and leave it at that. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let's just get into the books. Okay, so book one was a carryover from April, and it was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This one, I think I give it 4 stars? Maybe 4.5? Maybe even 5. This is, see, prime example, I can't remember. I don't feel like this was exactly a 5-star read from what I can remember now, and maybe that means that even if I did rate it 5 stars at the time of reading it, I maybe need to reduce it down to 4.5. I really love this series though, I really do, and I'm going to be so sad to be following different characters in the next installment, because I believe what the author's going to do is do all of the different kind of houses. So this is obviously following the House of Night. I think the next ones are going to be the House of Blood or the House of Shadow, I think that's what it's called. So I believe we're getting 2 books for each house, and then I would assume, because we've had a novella for the House of Night, that we may well have a novella for the others as well. So yeah, while I'm looking forward to the next installment because I'm really curious to see what happens, and it is going to follow one of the side characters in this duology, I will be sad not to be in Araya and Rain's POV anymore, because I did really enjoy them as characters. I really like the representation of vampires in this series. It's very different from any other vampire books I've read, and I do love a vampire book. So it was nice to kind of read something that felt a little bit more original and not just a rehashing of, I don't know, Twilight or The Vampire Diaries or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those, but this definitely felt a lot more original. I also like the fact that Araya... That's a spoiler, I can't say that. Okay, never mind. This was a really satisfying conclusion to this duology, at least. I really liked kind of how it ended. I really liked how everything was wrapped up. I like there was little bits that have been left open for the next books to kind of clear up. And I will be revisiting this and rereading it probably later on in the year, as I will with quite a few books actually at the moment. I've kind of got on my radar to do some rereads of later in the year, because I really like this and I'm excited to read more from this author. I know she's got another series that is completed, I think, so I want to pick that up at some point. And she's got another standalone book that fits within the Nyaxia world, but doesn't fit within this series as well, that I also really want to read, because I basically just want to devour everything that this woman has written. Okay, so next is the book that I absolutely hated, despised, and will be unhauling. I've literally only kept it in my possession so far for the purpose of this video, so I'm really excited to get this video filmed so I can get this out of my life, and that is Heartless Heathens by Santana Knox. Now, this was a Booktok recommendation, and it has definitely made me a little bit more cautious to freely pick up and believe everything that I see on Booktok. I'm using that kind of lightly because I know not to trust that everybody's opinion on Booktok is going to be, you know, the same as mine, but this was really hyped. In the dark romance community, everybody was loving it, so I was like, okay, well, you know, if a lot of people are loving this, I probably will as well. I was wrong. This was 1 star, and that 1 star was a generous 1 star as well. If I could have rated it 0, I probably would. So this book basically follows a girl whose name I can't even remember, and she's being kept in this like religious academy. So this is, I should say, kind of a dystopian future novel. It has elements of current political climes and stuff mentioned in it, but I think it's supposed to be set around our kind of time, but in kind of like a parallel universe, where, not a parallel universe, but a dystopian version of our time, basically. God, that was difficult. So there's like references to certain political things that are happening right now. There's references to a pandemic, but not COVID, but I would assume it's referencing COVID. And basically in the wake of the COVID pandemic, or the pandemic that this society faces, religion takes over as kind of the ruling entity in the country, which I'm assuming is supposed to be the USA. And therefore all kind of jobs, all education, everything else is controlled by the church, and this girl is being kept in like a clock tower, very Hunchback of Notre Dame-esque, by Frollo, who is like a priest at this school, and he basically is obviously mistreating her. There is like a twist at the end and you kind of find out what her link to him is, but he's mistreating her. And anyway, one day this group of boys moves into this abandoned clock tower, like the floor below her, and she's supposed to remain a secret and she doesn't, and so she kind of has like a reverse harem relationship with all of them. But there was so much wrong with this. Like, first of all, the writing was the worst I think I've ever read. Like, truly, it was awful. Like, every third page I was putting this down and being like, I cannot continue. And then I continued, and I think there's like, yeah, 380 odd pages, so it's not a quick book to get through if every third page you're wanting to like gouge your eyes out with a spoon. So I really didn't enjoy it, as you can probably tell. The writing, like I say, was awful. So many plot holes, so many things that just would not happen in any reality whatsoever. You know, if a girl has been held prisoner for like her entire life in a clock tower, she's not going to all of a sudden like just be okay with like sex, and especially not sex with like 3 men. She's not going to be able to just like have a conversation, or, you know, just accept everything that's going on. She's going to have questions. She's going to be experiencing like sensory overload, being out in the world for the first time, and like experiencing technology properly for the first time, and like just none of that was covered in this. It was very unrealistic and just really bad. I don't like any of the characters, I didn't like any of the men, I didn't like any of anything really, and that's actually going on the unhaul pile. I don't even know why I put it down next to me again. So yeah, that was 1 star. It was awful. Don't waste your time. Just don't waste your time. If you're wanting like a dark reverse harem book, there are so many others that are so much better than that, and that I would recommend you read instead of that one. Anyway, we went from a 1 star to a 5 star. We have A Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I think this might be one of my favourite Sally Rooneys, just purely because this didn't give me the existential crisis that most Sally Rooney books give me, and for that I was incredibly grateful. I say it was a 5 star, honestly I've forgotten a lot of what happened in this book now, to be honest. It was just kind of one of her slice of life vignettes, I suppose, following, you know, a group of friends who are interlinked, their relationships, their loves, their trauma and everything else. It was good. It was really good. I really liked it. I liked this set of characters. I liked the fact that they were a little more flawed than the ones in Conversations with Friends, which is the last Sally Rooney book that I read. I feel like this was a much more accomplished book than that. Obviously that was her debut, and like this is now, you know, book 3. This is like following the success of Normal People, and obviously Normal People is a huge accomplishment and, you know, something huge to live up to. So this was always going to be a difficult novel, I think. You know, how do you follow something that's been so critically acclaimed? But she did it, and she did it really well. I wouldn't say it's necessarily as good as Normal People. I just personally preferred it because it didn't give me the existential crisis. If you're looking for like objectively the best story, I still think Normal People is it. But yeah, I really like this, and kind of being able to see her writing improve over the course of 3 books as well is really impressive, considering she was a great writer for her debut. Like, being able to just see that gradual progression was just, it was fantastic. Then we had Steel King by Daphne Perry, which is the Clifton Forge series, book 1. I think I gave this 4 stars, maybe 3.5. It was okay. It was a typical Daphne Perry small town romance. This had a little bit more to it, I think, than the Eden series does, in terms of it was a little bit more high stakes. However, I do prefer the Eden series to this so far. Everything about the Eden series, the setting, the interlinked standalones, you know, getting to really know the family, I really enjoy. Whereas this, I know it's only book 1 in the series, but this just didn't quite do that for me. I did really enjoy it though. I like the characters. Like I say, I like the fact that it was a little bit more high stakes. There was a little bit more going on. I probably will pick up the second book in the series at some point, because I'm curious to see kind of like how other characters that we've seen already are going to probably get their own books, and how they're going to be brought in, and, you know, what's going to happen and how everything progresses, because I do believe these are interlinked standalones, but just slightly more interlinked than the Edens. The Edens you can read and just pick up and put down, and it doesn't matter really what order you read them in, whereas I think this has just a slight bit of a narrative that goes through it all. I feel like I can't talk today. I haven't spoken in depth about books for a while, so if this isn't really making sense, please just forgive me, okay? I feel out of practice. But yeah, I did really enjoy this anyway, and I just recommend everything that Devney Perry writes, to be honest. Yeah. Then another 5 stars, we had The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series that follows Jax and Evangeline. I loved this. I'm now waiting on like tenterhooks for the 3rd and final installment in this trilogy, which is released later on this year, because I just need to know how this is going to end. If Jax and Evangeline are not endgame, I'm going to sue. I'm going to sue her. That's just all I have to say about it. I'm going to sue, because they are perfection. I love them, and I hate everything that's going on right now, because I just want them. I just want them. So there's that. Then I read my first Joan Didion, actually. This is Slouching Towards Bethlehem. I picked this up because Matt Healy likes this book, and if you know me, you will know that I worship at the altar of our Lord and Saviour Matthew Timothy, and he has recommended this book on multiple occasions. I actually bought it because I was going to do a reading like Matt Healy for a week video, but then just realised that if I have to reread like In Cold Blood or On the Road, which I would quite happily do, it's gonna mean that I can't read as much of my physical TBR as I need to, that I need to get through. So I didn't do the video, but I really enjoyed this. I think I gave this one like 3 stars. So the first part was essays about places, so typically within Los Angeles and kind of the Southern California areas. It kind of covered like news articles and things that were happening at the time, so it was interesting, but it didn't captivate me, and I was a little bit like, oh, this wasn't really what I picked this up for. But then the second part of the book was a lot more personal, and it was Didion's own kind of writings and musings on writing and her career and her processes and everything else, and I found that fascinating, and I really appreciated and enjoyed that. And then part 3 was places again, but this was kind of places that meant something to Didion, so again it just had that kind of personable element to it, which I really appreciated and made it a lot more interesting for me. Like, she featured New York quite vividly, which I really enjoyed, and also Hawaii as well, which I wasn't expecting. So all in all, I really enjoyed this, and I will be picking up more of Didion's essay collections. I do have my Year of Magical Thinking on my physical TBR. I don't know when I will get to it, but I do have that, so that's probably the one I will read next. But I did want to read, she's done a collection about Miami, and we all know how much I love Miami, so I do want to pick that up at some point. And then, yeah, I just want to kind of read through all of her writing, I think, because I do find her fascinating, both to read about, but also from a writer's perspective as well, like learning about her processes and her thoughts and like how she approaches things, her use of language, like how she creates such beautiful and meaningful sentences. Fascinates me. So yeah, I'll definitely be reading more from her and talking about her more in depth in future videos, so I hope you guys don't mind that. Then I deviated from my TBR that I kind of had in mind but didn't really commit to, and I picked up The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, which I gave 3 stars. This was good. I couldn't predict anything that happened in it, so that I really appreciate it, because quite often I find thrillers very predictable. Yeah, I nearly said predictive then, but that's not the word, predictable. This one I couldn't predict. I did not get the supernatural element. I will say though, I wish there hadn't been a supernatural element, because I think that just kind of made it a little bit more like, oh, I think it would have been better if it had been a bit more chilling and a little bit more like... The only time I find the supernatural elements work well in these kind of thrillers, as if the thriller is literally about a haunted house. Like that book that he has about haunted houses that I read, I can't remember what it's called, Lock Every Door or something, that I really enjoyed. Oh no, is that the other one? Anyway, the book he has about haunted houses I really enjoyed, and I didn't mind the supernatural elements because that's what I was picking up the book for. This I wasn't, so that just kind of took me out of it a little bit and kind of, I don't know, ruined the ending somewhat. But I did really enjoy it anyway, regardless. It was interesting, and like I said, I couldn't predict it, so for that reason it got 3 stars. I feel like I'm really not doing a good job of going in depth about these books. Normally, if I'm doing like an in-depth wrap-up, I will make notes as I'm reading, but I didn't do that in May because I wasn't planning an in-depth wrap-up in May, and now you're getting an in-depth wrap-up, and I feel like I can't remember anything that I read. So that's great, really encouraging, right? Anyway, then I read A Touch of Ruin by Scarlett St. Clair. This was another 3 stars. This was just it was okay. I didn't hate it, didn't love it, didn't hugely vibe with it. Or did I give it 2 stars actually? No, I actually think I gave this 2 stars, which probably makes more sense. I was just really underwhelmed, like really underwhelmed, and a lot of it just felt a bit arbitrary. The writing was just lackluster. I felt like nothing was really followed through with properly. It just made me feel a little bit slumpy. I didn't really want to pick it up. I wasn't looking forward to delving back into it, and that was a real disappointment for me because I really enjoyed A Touch of Darkness. I do have A Touch of Malice on my physical TBR. I will get to it at some point, but because that was only a 2-star read for me, I'm not like rushing to pick it up right now, which is a shame because I did want to finish that series like soon. But yeah, it just took the edge off for me quite a lot. Then we read another 4-star read. We read The Words by Ashley Jade. You will have seen my reading vlog where I talk about this book in more depth, so I will not kind of go too over the top now, but I really enjoyed this. This is about a young girl whose father's a songwriter, and she has a crush on this guy in her school called Phoenix, who is kind of like this untouchable kind of bad boy vibe, and she ends up having to tutor him, and then she learns that they share a mutual love of music. Obviously he then becomes like a super successful musician because of course, and their lives end up intertwined once again in the future. There's like a lot of betrayal, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot that goes on in this book, but I honestly really enjoyed it. I liked the fact that it was 700 pages because it meant we really got to delve properly into Phoenix and Lennon's like story together, and so therefore their connection felt a lot more real than when you're just reading a book and it's going quite quickly because it's, you know, limited space, but there's not enough time to kind of like really delve in. This worked for me. And I like the fact that I wouldn't say it's a slow burn, but it's also not like a super quick insta love either, so that felt really good. Like the payoff was so worth it, and I really loved that. I found myself really captivated by the story. I was really immersed in it. I was really emotionally invested. The only things I didn't like, which kind of knocked it off a little bit for me and which I mentioned in my video, was the representation of like plus size individuals in the first part of the book. Lennon is plus size, and I just feel like in the first bit, I know that the author was trying to kind of represent her kind of like teenage insecurities and worries about being attractive and people finding her attractive, but I think just the constant repetition and reinforcement of that idea that plus size people are not sexy just didn't work for me because it's not true, you know. So that bothered me because I was reading it and thinking like if I fell into that category I would be really annoyed by this or like upset about this, so I feel like it might not be the nicest for readers to read. But once we got through that, it was really good. And then at the end, just the epilogue didn't hit for me. I feel like I would have preferred an epilogue that was set a year later rather than 3 months later, so we could have seen a little bit more of a progression in what was happening with the main characters and also with the band. That being said, I believe there is a second one being written following some of the side characters in this book, and I would assume because there's a second one being written and you know it's going to follow some of the side characters, I would imagine that Phoenix and Lennon will make an appearance in that book as well. So hopefully we will learn a little bit more about how they are in the future, because it has a happy ending but it doesn't feel like a happy ending, if that makes sense, and I could just have done with a little bit more just to kind of really cement that for me. But it was good and I enjoyed it, so that was a 4-star. Then I read Sinner by Sierra Simone, which is another one that was in that same reading vlog that I read The Words in. This one was another 3-star. This started off with all of the magic and promise of a Sierra Simone, and then it just kind of fell a little bit lackluster for me again. I think my problem with this is that I was hoping it would live up to Priest, which was fantastic. It was a 5-star read. I loved it. And while this is a longer book, so it should really have the space and time to become what Priest was, it actually really doesn't manage to. Priest felt more high stakes, there was more going on, there was more angst, there was more kind of drama, and then this, just everything felt too easy. And I know I said that in my vlog when I kind of spoke about my feelings after initially finishing it. Everything felt too easy. His relationship with her brother and how that all kind of was resolved just felt too easy, and there was no real like stress. All of the issues with his colleague was never even really wrapped up. That was just kind of like left loose, as if to say, oh, you know, but when you were reading it you felt like that was going to be a much bigger storyline. There was just a lot that just didn't work for me in this, and I don't know honestly if I'll pick up the next one or not, because I just don't really think I can be bothered. I wish I'd left it with Priest, because that was just a disappointment for me, and now I just feel like that series is a bit tainted for me. But anyway, it's fine. It just wasn't what I was hoping. The smut was next level though. But I would expect nothing less from Sierra Simone, honestly. Then I read Yellowface. I got the gorgeous Waterstones exclusive signed edition. Just look at that. It's so good. It's so good. And so's the book. The book was 5 stars. I absolutely bloody loved every single second of this. I know it's had some mixed reviews, I think because it's very, very different from anything that R.F. Kuang's written before. So I can understand why, you know, people may go into it expecting more either fantasy or like speculative fiction. And obviously it's neither of those. This is more contemporary. But I think it covers some really important topics of discussion, especially relating to diversity within the publishing industry. Obviously I'm not somebody who works in the publishing industry, but kind of being able to see a lot of R.F. Kuang within this book leads me to kind of believe that how she's portraying it is pretty legit. It makes you angry. It makes you really angry. And at times though, I find that R.F. Kuang's ability to make characters so believable has never been so evident than in this book. Because this is, our protagonist is an anti-hero. They're the absolute opposite of anything that you want to root for. And yet, at times when you're reading this and you're immersed in this character's POV, you start to believe the lies that she's telling herself, and you start to almost root for her. And then it's like taking you out of the book for a minute and being like, hang on a minute. Why am I rooting for this person? This person is an awful individual. I shouldn't be rooting for this. Why am I? But I think R.F. Kuang did that on purpose to kind of, I guess, really make you think about how everything works in the publishing industry and how often things like this could happen and how easily things like this could happen. And yeah, I found it very, very well done. And it made me angry, it made me laugh. It was incredibly engaging, incredibly well written. It was satirical, it was believable and equally unbelievable in places, and I loved it. It was a very, very easy 5 stars. And then my final book that I read in the month of May, I actually finished it on June 1st, but I'm including this in my monthly wrap up for May because I think I had about 5 pages left to read when I finished it. And that is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. This was another 5 stars. This was brilliant. This reminded me quite a lot of Sally Rooney actually, but Sally Rooney if she was American. And this was very harrowing. It was very eye-opening. It was very emotional. It was a difficult read in so many places, but just so well written. So I didn't know when I picked it up, but the author, Layla Motley, actually was the Young Poet Laureate for Oakland in California, and you can really tell that she's a poet from the way that she writes. It's very lyrical, it's very beautiful, it's very expressive, and oh god, I just like fell in love with her writing. The story itself, like I say, it's quite harrowing. It's very sad. It kind of covers, you know, police corruption and brutality against black women in America. The story in particular follows Kira, whose mother is in prison, her dad's died, her brother, who is older than her and is supposed to be taking care of her, is not doing that at all, and so she's fending for herself, trying to keep a roof over their heads, trying to help look after the neighbour's kid, and so she ends up prostituting herself because she feels like she has no other option. And then she gets blackmailed basically by the local police force, and it's kind of the ensuing situation, the criminal trial and everything else. It's very deep, very dark, very thought-provoking, and it was fantastic. I cannot wait to see what else Layla Motley writes, because I will be picking it up and I will be devouring it, and I can't wait. I feel like at the moment we have such an amazing crop of young authors, and in particular young female authors, who are absolutely killing it. You know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking Layla Motley, R.F. Kuang, Chloe Gong, and Olivia Blake. Those 4 right now are absolutely phenomenal. We're just very blessed to be living in a time when there is so much great literature and so much thought-provoking literature being published. Like, I'm so grateful to live in a world with books, honestly, and to live in a world where we get access to these authors' minds and the worlds they create. Like, incredible. Anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I know it was a slightly less eloquent wrap-up than I have been known to give in the past, but I feel like I say slightly out of practice because I have not done a in-depth sit-down wrap-up for quite some time. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what your favourite book of the month was, what your favourite book of May was, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye, friends.